This is the Cybersecurity Incident Response Forensics and Counterintelligence Role Presentation made by 3 cybersecurity interns, Diego Lopez Coronado, Sabrina Major, and Dennis Morgan. I, Dennis Morgan, will be covering incident response, Sabrina Major will be covering forensics, and Diego Lopez Coronado will be covering counterintelligence. Every cyber attack leaves behind a trail, and the real challenge is knowing how to find the trail and interpret what it means. The purpose of this presentation is to explain how cybersecurity professionals respond when an attack happens and how they investigate digital evidence and how they identify the threat actors responsible. Incident response will be the first cybersecurity defense role we'll talk about in this presentation and will set the foundation for everything else that comes after it. This role is the first to act when something is wrong, and the actions taken here determine how the rest of the process goes. Without strong incident response team, the investigation and attribution phases become much harder. Incident response is also a phase where communication begins, team alerts leadership, coordinate with IT, and start documenting what they see. The early communication within this role is very important as it can shape the entire response strategy moving forward. What is an incident responder? An incident responder is essentially the first line of defense when an attack has been detected. Their job is to investigate and analyze the threat and take the necessary actions to stop or contain the incident in an organization's network. Incident responders also collaborate closely with other teams like IT administrators and security engineers to make sure containment actions don't accidentally disrupt business operations. You can compare this role to digital firefighters. Just like firefighters, an incident responder must act quickly and make decisions under pressure to prevent the situation from getting worse. The overall importance of incident responders is to minimize the damage caused by cyber attacks, prevent attackers from causing continuous harm, and restore normal operation. They also play a key role in strengthening the organization's defenses after an incident by identifying weaknesses and helping prevent similar attacks in the future. Some of the common tools used by incident responders are SIEMs, otherwise known as Security Information and Event Management Tools, with the most common SIEM platforms being Splunk or Microsoft Sentinel. Other notable tools are Intrusion Detection Systems, or IDS, and Endpoint Detection Systems, or otherwise known as EDS. All of these tools are helpful for responders to effectively detect suspicious activity and respond properly. The cybersecurity cycle. This slide shows the bigger picture on how other cybersecurity roles operate during cyber attacks and how each role fits into the overall defense process. In other words, it connects everything to the larger cybersecurity ecosystem. The first cybersecurity cycle model we have is the general cybersecurity cycle, which are prevention, detection, response, investigation, and attribution. Incident responders mainly operate under the response phase, digital forensics in the investigation phase, and counterintelligence in the attribution phase. Each of these 3 roles are connected in a sequence where one hands off information to the next. Incident responders are the first to engage once an attack has been detected on an organization's network, and the actions they take in preserving systems logs develops the evidence available for digital forensics teams during the investigation phase. Both the digital forensics and counterintelligence roles will be explained further later on, but for the purpose of how they both fit into the general cycle, I will briefly explain how they operate. All preserved evidence from the response phase gets passed down to the digital forensics teams during the investigation phase. They use the preserved evidence to understand how the attack happened, and their findings will be the foundation for the final phase. Counterintelligence teams during the attribution phase rely on the patterns uncovered by the forensics team to determine the motives of the attacker. Instead of working separately, these roles all function like a chain to strengthen the organization's systems. The other model we have is the National Institute of Standards and Technology, or NIST, Incident Response Cycle, which is preparation, identification, containment, eradication, recovery, and lessons learned. These steps are the primary steps used by incident responders to effectively mitigate and eliminate system threats. These models show how incident response is not just a reaction of the moment, it's a repeatable and organized process many organizations rely on to stay resilient. When teams follow these frameworks, they not only respond faster, but they reduce damage and learn from each incident so they're better prepared for the next one. These cycles can also help organizations measure how mature their security posture is. If a company struggles with any of the steps, it becomes clear in which areas need improvement. Key responsibilities and challenges from incident responders. One of the three main responsibilities incident responders have is to monitor and analyze security alerts from various tools such as SIEMs, IDS, and EDRs. They're constantly looking for signals or alerts that lead to signs of unusual or malicious activity. They're also in charge of collecting and preserving any digital evidence they find during a cyber attack, which is very important not just for forensics reasons, but also legal as well. And finally, they're responsible for eradicating any malicious threat and restoring normal operations to the organization systems as soon as possible. Some of the main challenges incident responders face is the sheer volume of cyber attacks. Responders have to sort through lots of unnecessary noise to find the real threats, and not only that, attackers are constantly evolving their tactics rapidly. Another challenge is limited resources. Many organizations don't have the proper budget to support incident response teams, so they either end up with teams lacking in proper security tools or teams lacking in professional cybersecurity experience. And finally, weak escalation or collaboration can slow down response efforts, making it harder to assess severity of threats, prioritize incidents, and coordinate effectively. These challenges show why incident response is both a demanding and essential role, and why strong processes and well-trained teams are important in this field. In this final slide, I want to shift the focus onto you and put you in the mindset of an incident responder. Imagine you're working for an organization and suddenly you notice unusual activity on a network. It may be a spike in the network traffic, a strange login attempt, or a system behaving in a way it shouldn't. You don't know yet if it's a false alarm or the start of a real attack. So here's the question I want you to ask yourself. What would you do first? Would you report it, investigate it, ignore it and hope for the best, or take immediate action and isolate the system? Pause here to reflect on what you would do as an incident responder. These are the kind of questions incident responders have to think of every day when an incident is detected, and have to make decisions often with limited information and very little time. Thinking through this scenario helps you understand how important quick judgment, communication, and teamwork is in cybersecurity. There's rarely a perfect answer to anything, but doing nothing is the one choice that will make everything worse.
Digital forensics begins after the threat has been contained. Once the immediate danger is handled, investigators shift their focus to understanding what actually happened. Digital forensics is the process of collecting, preserving, and analyzing digital evidence after a cybersecurity incident. The goal is to reconstruct the attack and identify how the system was compromised. This includes examining logs, files, and system activity to piece together a timeline of events. It's important that this process is done carefully because the evidence must remain accurate and unchanged, especially if it's going to be used for legal or investigative purposes. In simple terms, digital forensics answers the question, what happened and how did it happen? To perform digital forensics, analysts rely on specialized tools and techniques designed to uncover hidden or deleted data. One commonly used tool is autopsy, which allows investigators to analyze disk images and recover deleted files. This helps reveal user activity and potential malware. Another tool is Forensics Toolkit, which is widely used in professional investigations. It can process large amounts of data, search for evidence, and organize findings efficiently. Analysts also use memory analyst tools like volatility to examine RAM. This is important because some malware only exists in memory and disappears once the system is turned off. These tools allow investigators to uncover evidence that is not immediately visible and build a complete picture of the attack. The key responsibilities of a digital forensics analyst include analyzing logs, examining files and system activity, and collecting and preserving evidence. One major real-world example is the 2014 Sony Pictures cyber attack. In this case, attackers used destructive malware known as Destover, which wiped systems by overwriting critical data like the master boot record. Forensics teams worked alongside the FBI and private cybersecurity firms to investigate the attack. They discovered that the attackers initially gained access through spear phishing emails. From there, they moved through the network, exfiltrated sensitive data, and deployed the wiper malware. Investigators also found that the attackers used a technique called time stomping, which alters the file timestamps to hide their activity and make detection more difficult. Through forensic analysis, they were able to trace patterns in the malware code that linked the attack to North Korean threat actors. This ultimately led to a U.S. indictment in 2018. This case shows how digital forensics not only explains what happens, but also supports accountability and national-level investigations. Before I continue, I want you to think like a forensic analyst. You've just been alerted to suspicious activity on a system. When you investigate, you notice multiple failed login attempts, followed by a successful admin login. Shortly after that, there's a large amount of data being transferred to an external IP address. To make things more concerning, system logs suddenly stop recording and the machine is still powered on. At this moment, you have to make a decision. Do you shut the system down immediately? Do you disconnect it from the network? Or do you start digging through files right away? This is where forensics thinking becomes critical. In forensics, the first decision can determine whether evidence is preserved or lost forever. Once evidence has been collected through forensics, the next step is counterintelligence. Counterintelligence focuses on identifying who is behind the attack, understanding their methods, and preventing future incidents. Unlike incident response, it does not directly stop the attack. Rather, it analyzes the bigger picture. This includes studying attacker behavior, identifying patterns, and connecting attacks across different organizations. Tools used in this phase include threat intelligence platforms, IP reputation databases, and frameworks like MeterAttack, which help to map attack techniques and tactics. Counterintelligence moves the investigation from what happened to who did it and why, which is critical for long-term cybersecurity strategy and national security. A strong example of counterintelligence in action is the 2021 pipeline ransomware attack. In this case, attackers gained access through a compromised password tied to an inactive VPN account. This highlights a common vulnerability: unused accounts that are not properly secured. The attack led to the shutdown of a major fuel pipeline, causing widespread disruption and prompting a national emergency declaration. The ransomware group responsible, known as DarkSide, used an initial access broker method to gain entry through the less secure systems. Counterintelligence teams played a key role in identifying the group, tracking their infrastructure, and understanding their tactics. The U.S. Department of Justice later recovered approximately $2.3 million of the ransom payment, demonstrating how intelligence and law enforcement can work together. This case also led to major changes, including new security directives, improved reporting requirements, and the creation of the Joint Cyber Defense Collaborative. It shows how counterintelligence helps in not only solving cyber crimes, but also preventing future attacks and strengthening national security.
Hello, my name is Diego Lopez Coronado. I'm a cybersecurity intern, and I will be presenting about the full process of cyber response using forensics and counterintelligence. When it comes down to a cyber attack, there are four main steps needed to ensure an efficient and seamless process for a response. These steps include detection, response, investigation, and evidence. The detection phase starts as soon as the first alert or first sign of an attack arises. Responders must analyze the data and confirm whether the attack is still ongoing or has stopped. Using software like SEIMs is a great way to receive alerts and logs, which can help in identifying the intrusion in which a cyber attack stemmed from. When it comes to response, containing the attack is a crucial way to preserve the information that is being targeted. Using the SEIM systems and data analyzed, the team can isolate machines and networks, which slows down and sometimes completely eliminates the spread of the attack. And during the investigation stage, this happens after the attack has been either resolved or mitigated as much as possible. The team must figure out how the attack was initiated and which route the attackers took and what they were looking for. They must also just keep logs of all this investigation to use it in the future when it comes to meetings and just planning ahead. During the evidence stage, evidence is presented to higher management to provide information on how the attack happened, who were the possible attackers, who was affected, and how it can be prevented in the future. We can see a real-world application about this in the example of Scripps Health in 2021, who was targeted by a ransomware attack and targeted their emails, records, patient portals. This attack created several issues, including breach of personal information, loss of revenue, and long turnover time. The response was to minimize the spread of the attack by taking most of their systems offline and going back to the classic pen and paper. They worked with cybersecurity companies to rebuild their systems and regain control. After this, an investigation was launched and has yet to identify the criminals. However, they have regained access to all their important information. The outcome of the situation was an increase in knowledge on how to combat and minimize the possibility of future attacks like this. Using their data and knowledge of the attack, they were able to patch and rebuild their infrastructure to combat situations exactly like the one that happened. Okay, let's do a quick brain teaser. What would you do in the scenario I'm about to give you? If you were a part of a cyber response team, what would your steps be after detecting an intrusion to a company machine? Now, you always want to remember the four steps. They are detection, response, investigation, and evidence. So since it's a company machine, you want to limit the access to certain personal information and crucial data. So always, as soon as you get that detection message from either your SCIM or maybe you found it yourself just looking through some code or something, you always want to go immediately and try and mitigate the damage by either taking systems offline or powering off that very machine so it doesn't spread. And then after that, always plan your investigation. We want to keep everything labeled to make sure the evidence stage is as complete as possible. And as well, in the investigation stage, you want to patch anything that may cause harm and present all that evidence as well when it comes to maybe like a company meeting. And your managers might have to ask you certain questions on how you stopped the process of the intrusion, and just making sure everything's labeled right and all the patches are up and running. And that's how you stop an intrusion. There are many challenges across this process. Cybersecurity is a never-ending cycle of planning ahead as well as fixing mistakes before cyber attacks happen. There are challenges across this process which include sophisticated attacks, limited resources, and slow detection times. In conclusion, cybersecurity professionals play a critical role in moving from responding to an attack to uncovering the evidence behind it. There are three main points in the cybersecurity field that need to be addressed: containing attacks with incident response, investigating the attacks with digital forensics, and connecting evidence to real-world actors with counterintelligence. Attackers rely on staying hidden. Cybersecurity professionals exist to find what others can't see. And that concludes our presentation, brought to you by Sabrina Major, Dennis Morgan, and myself, Diego Lopez Coronado. And we would just like to thank Elaine and Anisha for making all of this possible as our project management coordinators. Thank you very much, and y'all have a great rest of your day.